All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Foster from Terra Incognita, and today we're here to talk about COVID-19 and the future of tourism, and especially ecotourism. So thanks for being here. You might be a tourist, wondering how to travel safely and travel more ethically. At the same time, you might be a business owner, an ecotourism operator who's trying to make the most of a challenging and changing year. Or you might be someone else who's interested in tourism and how we can travel in a way that's a bit better for people and for planet. So regardless, welcome. And we're here to dive into this topic with a few special guests that I'm really excited to introduce. But first, I'll just let people join. So it'd be fantastic if you can just type in where you're from, where you're calling in from, into the comments, just to give us an idea of who's here today. And thanks to everyone who's joined, because I know for those of you who are joining from Europe, UK, Africa, etc., it's quite late in your day. And for those of you who are in Asia, Australia, you're probably sleeping, so you'll be watching the recording. Okay, Bocas del Toro, Renee. Welcome, Renee. Nice to see you from Panama. Got Sarah from Calgary. Lloyd. Hi, Lloyd. Laura from Portugal. Curtis from San Francisco. Nice. That's great. We've got a whole mix here. So again, we're doing this live, but we're also recording it. So we'll share the recording. Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Nice to see you too. Another friendly face. Thanks for being here. And I hope everyone worked out the time zone. We were a little bit worried that there might be confusion 1 hour this way or the other, just because it's one of those time zones that changes. So hopefully that was clear. And apologies if it was confusing. So quick introductions to us. As I said, my name's Christy Foster. I'm a co-founder of Terra Incognita. So we launched in 2018. And we basically wanted to help solve this problem we kept coming across, which is that it's really hard to find more ethical types of tourism. So, there's lots of great tourism, what we'd call ecotourism, that's sort of more sustainable environmentally, socially, economically, culturally, and trying to benefit conservation and local communities, local people. But quite often it's hard to find those types of tours and that type of tourism amidst all the options that are out there. So we wanted to sort of help find more and promote more of those types of tourism, and also just engage more people in what that type of tourism looks like, and how we can all sort of benefit people and planet more when we travel or engage with tourism. And this year, we've been largely focused on developing an ethical code of conduct for ecotourism, together with a whole community of people around the world. A lot of you are probably familiar already with that, but if you're interested, I'll share a link at the end where you can go for more info. So that's me and a brief introduction to Terra Incognita. Our co-founder, Nick Askew, and actually a new member of our team, Lloyd, who's here watching but not speaking today, are here in spirit. And we're really excited to be able to do this webinar. This is the first sort of official webinar that we've done. And I'm thrilled to introduce Jordan Flago, who's the co-founder and executive director of TREE. And TREE runs tours, among other things, in Belize and Guyana and Jamaica. So Jordan, if you want to just say a quick hi and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you, Christy. Yeah, excited to do this and partner with Terra Incognita and with Eventually, with Mita, and with the Iwokrama Centre with Dr. Thomas, who hopefully is joining us shortly. She's in Guyana, and Guyana is notoriously bad for traffic jams that come out of nowhere. So hopefully she's able to join soon. So yeah, my background is environmental science, sustainability, and I went to work in Guyana basically my first job out of university after my undergrad, and went back there to do my master's thesis, which was focused on how to use ecotourism to fund protected area management and conservation. So with that in mind, I founded Tree, and I was only able to do that after I went to work in Belize and did some environmental education in the forest there, and was able to take all my experiences and all the context that I had and all the learning that I've had in the field, along with my educational background, and create this organization that focuses on not only helping visit places sustainably, like Christy said, in Guyana, Belize, Jamaica, but also furthering sustainable development, cleaner energy, just a better environment in any way that we can. So that's our goal.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks, Jordan. So Jordan and I actually met something like 8 years ago, because we were both young leaders for sustainable development, which was a great program in Canada. And we both worked abroad in different parts of the world. And then little did we know that some years later, we'd both end up in the ecotourism sector and kind of align again. So that was really neat to have you here because of that too. And then I'm very excited to welcome Mita Karaman, who's the founder and CEO of Adventurely. Mita, could you tell us a bit more about Adventurely and what you do?
Sure. So an unexpected trip a few years ago had me traveling solo for the first time, and I really fell in love with just having that freedom by myself to explore and that independence, and it was just awesome. It was intoxicating for me. And then I moved from being just a solo leisure traveler to being a digital nomad solo traveler. And I spent the past 3 years digital nomading by myself across 8 countries. And I think I got another 3 years left in me, which I'm looking forward to. And right now I'm in Barbados. But one thing that kept coming back as a bit of a pain point when I was traveling solo, either for leisure or as a nomad, was just being able to find and connect with the right people and for the right things, and primarily for tourism. I kept noticing that I either had to get on a dating app, which wasn't always a comfortable experience as a woman by myself, or try to take on all these responsibilities on like meetup.com, which in a lot of destinations doesn't really have a presence. So I created Adventurely. So it's an app that helps digital nomads, solo travelers, and local adventure seekers connect for shared experiences. You can sign up at adventurely.app. And I'm very excited to participate in this very important conversation.
Great. Thanks, Mia, so much. Yeah, excited also to hear what you have to say about adventure and solo travel and how that relates to COVID too. And by the way, we'll share links to everyone's websites towards the end too, so you guys will know where to go for more information. As Jordan mentioned, Dr. Thomas Cesar from Iwokrama in Guyana is hopefully going to be joining, but might be just a little bit late. So we'll see her when she's able to get through Guyana's traffic and be here live. Great. So just before we start the discussion, I wanted to just run a very quick poll to see where, or rather, what best describes everyone who's attending. So I'm just going to launch the poll. Just say really quickly if you're either a tourist or a tourism operator, or a media representative, or something else. And if you're something else, you know, maybe you're an industry expert, or you come from a local community where tourism is happening, whatever the case is, if you want to type that in the comments and let us know, go for it as well. Yeah. Great. So you've got probably mostly over half tourism operators. We've got a few people from media. So for example, journalists or bloggers are similar. We've got a few tourists in the mix, and a few people who didn't fit those categories, which is great too, because I could have put, 10 different categories there. Great. And I see that you've just raised your hand. If you have a comment, I might just hold that till we get to the live Q&A at the end, but feel free to type it into the chat now if you'd like to share something. So basically how this will run is we're going to have a discussion with Jordan and Mita and Dr. Thomas Cesar when she arrives. We'll go through some questions about COVID, about ecotourism, about travel and safety and all that kind of stuff. And then towards the end, we're going to open it up to a live Q&A where anyone can ask questions. And if you have a question that you already know you want to ask, feel free to pop it into the Q&A box. So not the comments or the chat, but into the Q&A box. And that way it'll allow us to sort of upvote questions. So if you see a question you like, you can vote for it, and we'll try and answer those ones first. Great. All right. Lastly, I just want to mention that we are giving everyone who's here today a really special discount on one of TREE's upcoming tours in Guyana. So that's happening in April of 2021. Jordan's offering a really great discount during COVID, and we're offering an additional discount on the tour through Terra Incognita. So that's exciting. We'll talk about that at the end too. So let's dive in. I want to start with a question about just how you think tourism has been affected by COVID-19 to date, you know, since the beginning of this year, early this year, and or how ecotourism in particular has been affected by COVID. What do you guys think are some of the main issues?
Well, obviously with borders being closed, and especially early on in the pandemic, it was basically a shutdown of tourism. And even in places that didn't shut down, you know, themselves, just the general feeling and, you know, the inability to know what was coming in the near future, you know, that kind of anxiety and yeah, that kind of worry that came with not knowing if you would be able to go or return from where your destination. It was very difficult, I think, on travelers, on people who rely on tourism, ecotourism for their livelihood. I know in Belize, you know, a lot of people we work with, that is their entire livelihood. The entire country, tourism is the biggest industry. And it was just devastating. And even now, it's very uncertain in a lot of ways, and it's still difficult. And with ecotourism, you get to be out in nature more. And true ecotourism relies more on being in areas that are untouched and, you know, that are different from, say, the Cancun experience where you're at a resort, and there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy that as well, and, you know, in certain times, but when you want real ecotourism, you want to be out in nature and you want to be experiencing the natural world. So this has allowed that to regenerate a little bit, and, you know, certain areas to have a little bit of a break and to be a bit more untouched. And now is a chance to go back into those areas with true sustainable ecotourism, and it could end up being better for the future, but we need to do it right. And that's what we try to do. A lot of our vendors, a lot of people we work with, they try to do that. And if it's done correctly, yeah, it can really have a big impact.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting. I like the positive perspective looking at, you know, we often hear about what is sustainable tourism and, you know, what's too much, what's too little, what's the right balance so that tourism has a positive impact. And this is, yeah, kind of eye-opening to what happens when tourism slows down, and a huge opportunity to see what we can do better now that we've hit pause. Yeah. Mita, did you have anything to add, any perspective from your experience with Eventually and what's sort of happened this year?
I mean, I think it was just devastating for a lot of tourism operators what was happening since the industry came to a standstill. But I think maybe some of you guys might remember there were a bunch of social media posts about nature healing itself. Then they did turn into memes that people were saying nature is healing itself with things that were unrelated to nature. But there were some really interesting natural phenomenons that were happening at highly trafficked areas. One thing that comes to mind, I remember in Venice, the water was starting to change back to a much more prettier color blue because there wasn't over tourism happening. So it's, in some ways, it was good for the planet to get a little bit of a reset. But and then on the flip side of that is that in a lot of destinations, you have high amounts of people who are completely out of work. And so there's also a need for staff and just general economic output going to these areas to make sure that they're maintained and also so that their local GDP can be sustained too. So I think now is a good time to rebuild and rebuild smartly.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Great. Thanks, Mita. So what are organizations, you know, and by organizations that might be ecotourism operators or other organizations working in tourism, what's being done sort of to help out those local vendors or local communities that are just really dependent on tourism for their livelihoods? Do you guys have any examples?
Right now, it's still difficult because a lot of cases the borders are still closed. Even in Guyana right now, you can't go visit at this moment. Belize has just opened their borders, but there's restrictions. And what I think is crucial is to do it in a way that will allow it to remain open. So the way that Belize is doing this, I think, is very smart, and they don't want to shut down again. They don't want to go through this again. They've lost so much. Yes, like I said, their industry is made up of tourism is the largest part of their entire industry, and so many people have lost jobs, have lost incalculable income, and they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So from right now, opening with policies in place and with a plan that will allow people to keep visiting, even if this pandemic doesn't go away in the next few months, which it doesn't seem like it's going to. Even if we get a vaccine, the rollout, it's going to take a while. But what we've seen, especially in recent months, is infections can keep going up, but management and the way people are treated and the way that the steps that are taken to ensure that there will be infections, there will be people who get COVID, but to not have large scale outbreaks and have what happened in Italy early on, or in Spain early on. That's the key. And it seems like governments in places where tourism, especially ecotourism, are very, a very big part of their strategy, their plan, are doing what's right. And I only know from Belize, from Guyana, a little bit in Jamaica. That's my experience. And I'm not sure, what Mexico is doing in other countries. I'm not as well versed in that. But I do know the plan put forth by Belize, I believe will work really well. And same with Guyana. Guyana's not open yet, but when they do open, and especially for their pristine rainforest, which is one of the most beautiful, most pristine places on earth, I just hope they can do it in a way that doesn't need to shut down again, can allow people to come, from here on out.
Yeah, yeah. Which again might be, there's lessons in that for sustainable tourism in general too. How do we kind of manage and monitor tourism overall as we go to keep learning and improving and making sure that everything's operating as it should. Yeah. Mita, did you have anything to add? By the way, don't feel like you both have to answer every question. There's no pressure there.
I can speak a little bit to what I've observed in Barbados. So Barbados, the way that they've been getting tourists to come back and a little bit more meaningfully is through this welcome stamp, AKA digital nomad visa. So as opposed to a traveler coming down here for a weekend or a week and just sort of like running through the island, you're going to be here for several months at a time. And so that provides you a longer, more engaged experience and time to mingle more meaningfully with the locals and give back. There's been a number of charitable programs I've been seeing coming up where they're really trying to engage tourists to engage with different charitable organizations. I'm actually going to be volunteering with a local animal shelter and with a youth program here later this month and in November. And I'm excited to participate in that because I don't want to just come in here and feel like I'm just going to use and not give back. So I think those are two interesting things.
That's really neat. Reminds me of a conversation I had actually with neighbors here in Canada recently, and who had plans to travel this year and are now a little bit uncertain given the current situation, because on the one hand, there's an argument for traveling, and in this case to Latin America, to support the local economy, but at the same time, they're quite conscious of not wanting to do harm or overload their system. So yeah, finding ways that we can travel and be able to give back as part of that process. So it's positive for everyone. I think that's fantastic. Neat. I just want to say a welcome. There's a few more people joining as we go here and a few familiar faces. So nice to see you guys here. Thanks for joining us. And I just want to ask maybe too, this one might be a bit more for you, Mita, but what kind of opportunities are out there for solo travelers? I know I've definitely been in that situation many times where I've been working abroad or traveling on my own. And although I'm quite comfortable doing that, it is hard to find, you know, experiences and stuff to do when you're traveling on your own.
Yeah, it is. Because I mean, even if you want to sign up for like a group tour, especially if it's something like, oh, you're going to go do some kind of like camping experience overnight, or you're going to trek to this mountain, you kind of don't want to be the only person out there by yourself. So for the most part, a lot of people use Facebook groups, which I'm in a number of, but they can just be a bit spammy at times. So you just gotta search, you know, Facebook groups, you know, hopefully you get a hookup to a WhatsApp group where you can find someone. But I guess what I'm trying to do is just streamline the process a little bit better with the app that we're working on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Fantastic. And so people can just go on to your app basically and search experiences in the region of interest.
Well, we're not in as many regions as I'd like yet. We're currently in Playa del Carmen and Tulum, Mexico City, Bali, Barbados, and in New York. So we've just been taking our time to sort of scale out each destination and make sure that we can build partnerships. And we've built a number of awesome local partnerships with each scale that we do.
That's really neat. Yeah. Well, I know it takes a long time to know any given destination, so that makes complete sense.
Yeah, it does. And I actually prefer to make sure that I've spent some time in the destination and know it before I start putting it up out there. Like I've seen some web-based tourism providers that have no experience whatsoever in a destination. They just start putting information up and it's like, what? A lot of it is incorrect. So I think that's really important if you're going to be in this business to make sure that the leadership team has domain experience in the places that you're trying to sell and promote.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So just thinking in terms of COVID-19 and safety, what, first from a perspective of tourists, what can tourists do to kind of ensure that they can plan a safer experience, whether that be a regular tourism experience, whether that be an ecotourism experience? What can travelers do in the coming months or year? Any thoughts on that? You guys can fight over it.
Yeah, I'll go just because Mina just spoke. I think that the key thing is to follow the local guidelines and the guidelines of the country you're from. Basically, yeah, you want to be responsible. You don't want to contribute to, making a burden for either country. And just do what's within the limits and what's within the recommendations. And the good thing about ecotourism, though, is once you're there, right, once you've gone through the airport, which are spotlessly clean. I've flown once since the pandemic started, and the airports are so clean. If you can get through, get to your place, ecotourism, true sustainable ecotourism is in nature. And you're actually usually far away from other people, usually in areas that, you go to see the nature. And that's probably the best place you can be at this time. Now, the key is, what you don't want to do is go to, say, the Iwokrama Centre when Guyana opens back up, which is where we go with our tree trips, and go visit Fairview Village or go down the Kupukari, go down the Essequibo River and visit some of the indigenous villages and go there and introduce an infection to an area that was doing really well before. So just being, smart. If you can take a rapid test and make sure, okay, all the proper hygiene measures, everything that healthcare professionals tell you. I'm not a medical professional, so I listen to the guidelines given, follow them. I think that's important. And then really going to see nature, to go to see these areas that are so pristine and beautiful. That's probably your best bet, even when it's not a pandemic. So given you're gonna be in nature, I think that's just the way to go.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it helps to, I guess, to think of it from both sides, both what you need to do to keep yourself safe and what you need to do to keep the people and the places you're visiting safe. And those
Um,
kind of work hand in hand. Yeah, go ahead, Mita.
I think it's also important for travelers to make sure they have a good insurance policy and already set up, because you don't want to burden their system if, God forbid, something happens to you with COVID, and you're not in a position to take care of any medical bills. So I actually bumped up my current plan that I'm on, which I wasn't happy about to shit out of pocket, but it just felt like the ethical thing to do, considering I'm going to be here for extended time.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah. Even if you can access healthcare in the country that you're visiting, systems are probably overwhelmed in a lot of places, or under more stress in a lot of places. So yeah, whatever we can do as travelers to help not increase that burden is a good move.
Probably for your yeah, to make sure your flights and everything are either insured or covered in case of something happening as well. I think that's a big thing. And with our tree trips too, if anything were to happen and the country were not to be open and it was under lockdown again, then we get full refunds. Like I think that's important to make sure that's all in place as well for whatever trip we're taking.
Yeah, yeah, great. So how about, so that we kind of talked about travelers, tourists, whether you're going nearby or far, because sometimes it's just a case of traveling in your own country. But what can businesses do to kind of get through this rather tough, incredibly tough year, or even find ways to thrive, or new ways to work? There's lots of pressure on you guys now because there's just the two of you.
I think Mita should answer this because her former life, she dealt with the business world quite a bit. So I think take this away.
Oh God, thanks, Jordan. Okay, so when the pandemic first happened and everybody was at home, we launched some virtual experiences on Adventurely. And I think that really did start to kind of hold people over. But I think that after a while, everyone did get a bit fatigued. So I've been noticing the engagement has declined quite a bit with that. But on the upside, people are like super excited to find safe ways that they can go out and travel now. So now the attention has sort of shifted to how can I easily explain to folks exactly what's happening in these destinations that are open and make sure that they get up-to-date, accurate information. So we have a podcast. I actually just recorded the second episode of our podcast with a local here in Barbados, and I made sure that it was a local who's worked in tourism for a while and has a rapport with the health government and stuff here, and then can give accurate information. I wrote this blog post about my first 2 weeks coming down here and my personal experience of going through all the health and safety protocols. And there was a lot here in Barbados. They went really strict. So I think now it's about just giving them information so that they can make an informed decision on their own, with the right info before them.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's daunting for a lot of people, thinking about traveling and hearing from people who've done it, knowing exactly what's in place, having that information and being informed makes a huge difference. Yeah. And just on the point of virtual experiences, we've also come across quite a number of companies that ran, some form of tourism, ecotourism, or, volunteer internships that have converted those successfully into virtual experiences. So that's neat to see too, that can help fill some of that gap for experiences or learning. And of course it's not the same ever as being there in a place, but it's something. And that's pretty neat that we have the ability to do that and experience that in our own homes too. Yeah. And then while we're getting ready to get more of us back into real travel again. Yeah, great. Okay, so what, and Jordan, this might be a bit more of a question for you, but what do you think is being done to sort of ensure true sustainable travel or true ecotourism? Kind of like you mentioned, we're talking about tourism that's, if it's sustainable, it's environmentally and socially and economically and culturally sustainable. And if it's ecotourism, it's happening in a natural area, a more pristine area, and it's contributing to conservation and local people. What's being done to help ensure that happens?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you said you included the cultural aspect, because I think that's maybe the biggest thing. And you know, some places it just makes more sense. Like in Belize, where people had voted to not go through with offshore oil drilling, even though it would bring in more money to the country because they value the reef that much. And stuff like that's cultural, and I think that's a big part that often gets left out. But yeah, another big thing is measurement. So to give a little shout out to Terra Incognita, but the ethical ecotourism, the code of conduct, I think that's huge, because you need a set of standards, you need a set of measurements to go by. Otherwise, you can call yourself sustainable. I actually used to work with a travel company that claimed to be sustainable. I read it in a magazine somewhere they were sustainable. And they were very far from it, but they got to just claim that because they just said we're sustainable. But if you need measurements, you need third-party verification, and you need a way to show that you're actually doing what you're saying, and you need to know what you're doing. So, you know, for tree, I took a graduate degree in sustainable resource management and used that for my thesis to actually go to the Iwokrama Centre with Dr. Thomas here, who's just joined us, and got to see what that looked like. And in the case of Iwokrama, it was a 25% capacity was the most sustainable way to bring in funding from ecotourism, but still not have an impact on the environment that would be detrimental. So it's about finding that. You need to put in some time, some effort, put in the work, and have some verification. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to, you know, the perception from tourists and even ecotourism operators that it's hard to distinguish, you know, what's true ecotourism from something that might be labeled as eco, and how do you actually distinguish between those? Yeah. I'd just like to pause and welcome Dr. Thomas Cesar. It's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for being here. I know it's probably been a rush for you to arrive.
So sorry, yes.
That's no problem
traffic
at all.
jam and all, so sorry.
But no, it's fantastic to have you here. So as mentioned, Dr. Thomas Cesar is the director of Iwokrama International Centre for Rainforest Conservation and Development, and that's based in Guyana. Maybe if you don't mind, just introducing yourself very briefly, and then we'll jump back into the discussion.
Yeah, yes, sure. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm the Director for Resource Management and Training, actually, at Iwokrama. My boss is the CEO. I'm a tropical forest ecologist, I'm a scientist, but I'm now more in management. So when we talk about resource management, we're talking about natural resource management. So I'm responsible for the monitoring program at Iwokrama. I'm responsible for working with researchers, and also for training, the training courses and so on. Working with groups like, you know, university groups and so that may come to visit. Groups like, you know, when Jordan was with us, the interns, I was responsible for the internship program and so on. Also, I get the opportunity to work with the sustainable businesses that Iwokrama has. That includes tourism, sustainable forestry, and also training as a business. We do training as it relates to ranger training, tourism, and, you know, a number of things as relates to managing a protected area, as we do. And I don't think if I mentioned as well, we work with 20 Indigenous communities. So I also get to liaise and work along with the Indigenous communities that we partner with. We have a co-management agreement. So I could talk a little bit more about that a bit later. That's in a nutshell.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for the
introduction. And thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So we just sort of had a bit of an open discussion with the three, now four of us. Jordan had just sort of talked a little bit about, you know, what's being done to ensure sustainable tourism and especially ecotourism. Do you have anything to add to that? What's being done to ensure more sustainable tourism in Guyana?
Well, I think Guyana is really well placed for this new this new phase or new kind of tourism, well, newer, it's not new, but newer compared to, the fun beach, sand, fun in the sun kind of tourism. And it's certainly growing, the ecotourism aspect. Guyana has over 87% forest. So we also don't have the rush. We're small tourism growing. So we don't have the rush like you would have in Ecuador, Galapagos, and some of these Machu Picchu, Peru, and some of these other places that you would hear about. Very well placed in terms of being able to offer sustainable tourism, and also because our interior is largely inaccessible in a sense. We don't have hundreds and thousands of people going in daily. So as a tourist, a person is offered it's a very special place to visit, because you feel as if you're not rushed. You feel as also, another important thing is that we speak English. It's the only English speaking country in South America, and our indigenous people, our 9 tribal nations, people that you would meet, they would also speak English, even if it's as a second language. So you get to interact. And a lot of our nature-based tourism is actually linked to also indigenous culture as you go further away from the coast and into the interior, where you get the true nature-based ecotourism, if you want to call it. So I think we're well poised, and especially now that we're talking about COVID and tourism, people are looking to go to spaces where they're not clusters and hundreds of people on the beach or walking through trails and so on. And I think Guyana is well placed, as Jordan probably would have told you, to offer that kind of experiences, small groups. You could even, if you choose, you can have even more of an individual experience, or maybe groups of 2, 3, 4, or, as I said, just yourself. You could, you could go and you have a guide and you go along with the guide, especially for the next, I think, 18 months, 2 years, as COVID progresses. We have to see how travel will evolve. I think it offers many opportunities for Guyana, though.
That's great. Sounds fantastic. I think everyone listening probably wants to visit your country after hearing from you and Jordan. But great. So I just have one more question for the 3 of you, or anyone who wants to answer, and then we'll open it up to everyone to ask questions. And maybe we saved the biggest question for last, but what do you think the future of tourism, and specifically ecotourism, looks like now that everything's changing? Anyone want to tackle that one? It's a big question.
I think, well, as I continue, I'll just very briefly say this. COVID it could be frightening to many people, and it's caused a complete shutdown of tourism in Guyana since March. We at Iwokrama have had no income from tourism since March. And now we're looking at how do we open up? How do we keep our staff safe? How do we keep guests safe, and so on? But I think sometimes we have to look and see what would be the, as some people say, the silver linings. What are the silver linings? What can we take away? What have we learned? The environment apparently has been doing better since COVID, because, for many reasons, less driving and so on. So what are some of the lessons? Maybe we learn to take care of the planet a little bit better. And maybe there are opportunities for countries like Guyana, who don't have the big tourism numbers, to have, you guys come and visit, because it probably will be seen as a space that it's kind of safer, because you can do, it's vast, it's wide open, it's open air, not bunches of people. So I think we have that to offer. I think we have to look for silver linings. I think the tourism future looks bright, and we're going to get a handle on COVID. We've done it with other diseases. So as soon as we get the handle on it, I think it's very bright for ecotourism.
Great. very positive note. And it kind of links to what Jordan was saying earlier, that ecotourism in some senses is one of the best things you can look to do, so long as you can get safely to and from a place. Once you're there in nature and open air, it's relatively safe compared to a lot of other situations that are in places more densely populated. Yeah. Jordan, you looked like you wanted to add something earlier too.
Yeah, I just want to say that one thing we've learned from COVID is that you can't predict anything. And, you know, it was literally changing by the hour early on. Like, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get back to Canada when I was in South Africa. And it's still unpredictable to this day. And with that, I think kind of what Dr. Thomas was saying, that the future is bright, and I think we'll build back better. We'll come back and we'll be more, we'll be thinking about it more, how we can do a better job, and we'll want the smaller groups and things that are actually better for the environment. But at the same time, that could just flip if what the past has taught us is that people could crave to be in big groups more than ever because they've been denied it for so long. And I'm very curious to see what happens. But I think if I had to bet, I would say it comes back with people in smaller groups, respecting the environment more, and I think it will be better, I guess.
Right. Mita, did you want to add anything? You're going to have an opportunity in a minute here with the Q&A too.
I guess to just sort of emphasize what was already said, especially in Jordan's last comment, I think it's an opportunity to build from the ground up. So maybe if you see new hotels and accommodation providers or new tour providers coming, you know, maybe the governments might have an opportunity to have different standards required. You know, a lot of buildings, a lot of things from the past may not have been created with sustainability in mind. And so now that we've had this pause and this reset, things can be built from the ground up more thoughtfully.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because, you know, even for those of us that are working in the, you know, ecotourism space or sustainable tourism space, even then it's difficult and confusing at times to figure out what we should be doing and how and when and where. But there's an opportunity here to bring more people into awareness about that. You know, how can we operate better? How can ecotourism operators set up their business in a more sustainable way? How can, government agencies better sort of regulate things? So huge opportunity. Thanks. Well, I think we'll end this part of the session on that really positive note. I'd like to open it up to anyone who has questions for our guests. I think we've got a couple questions in here already. Great. One comment about how amazing Guyana sounds, which is fantastic. So again, just if you have a question, please do type your questions into the Q&A box, and that'll hopefully allow you to like them and upvote them. So we'll start from this question from Daniel. Does the lag/pause in ecotourism these months provide us an opportunity to measure the cost of conservation, thinking about private nature reserves and the like, without the cost of hosting tourism? Okay, so measuring this baseline might help find other ways to finance sustainability at ecotourism destinations. Yeah, interesting question. Thanks for that. Does anyone want to have anything to say on that? Sort of measuring what it might cost to conserve, you know, ecosystems or species in an area or reserves, maybe more specifically, without tourism, you know, like other tools beside, and then we could look into other tools besides tourism as well.
I think Dr. Thomas would be best to answer this based on, that's exactly what Iwokrama
Yes.
does. I mean,
That's what
tourism's a rather actually a newer addition, right? I mean, it was funded a lot by grant funding, by other means before tourism became a main driver.
Did you?
Yes, I could respond to that. We have a saying that we say, conversation without money is just a it's conservation without money is just a conversation. And that's a very important quote, because conservation is expensive. And in terms of managing areas, because you have to have equipment, you have to have rangers, you have to have staff, you have to, you know, the whole operational cost of conservation, running a protected area as we do, because it's not just setting it aside. You also have to monitor, you have to look at illegal activities. You know, there's so many things that could be happening. And Iwokrama has a road running through it, a public access road that you can go from the city, Georgetown, to Brazil, right? So we have to manage that. We're bordered by rivers. We have to manage and monitor that as well. So it's very difficult to actually manage conservation by just having one type of income. So say tourism, we manage 1 million acres of forest, just to let you know. That's a big area. So if you think of maybe Trinidad or the country of Luxembourg in Europe, it's the size of many countries and many islands, right? So there in itself lies a challenge. So Iwokrama was set up to really show that we can develop models of sustainable use by using the forest in a good way. It's all forested, tropical intact rainforest. But how it's set up, the area is zoned into 2 areas. So we have what is called a wilderness preserve. It's only for research, and it's set up as and also like a control site. The other half of the forest is known as a sustainable utilization area, in which we can do sustainable use activities. So tourism would be one. We do sustainable timber. We are FSC certified. We do training and so forth. So it's more of what we call like a multi economic way of getting money to help run the protected area. But even from those 3 businesses that I mentioned, that's not enough to run and keep Iwokrama going. So we also have to write proposals, especially like for research oriented work. You write proposals, bring in money for that. For like community oriented work, like somebody asked, how do we help the local communities? You know, so you have to have that multi aspect approach when you think of funding conservation. If it's just a small lodge within a community or within a small area, for example, that's different. But the scale, the size of Iwokrama and how we manage it and what it was set up for, it's very intriguing. And with the local communities, as I see somebody's asked the question, we work with 20 indigenous. We have 9 tribal nations in Guyana. We work primarily with a group known as the Makushi people, but they co-manage the protected area with us because that area is seen as their ancestral place. And in fact, one community lies within the boundaries. So one of the 20 communities, and they own land within the protected area. In Guyana, indigenous communities actually have title ownership to their land, which is not the same for some other countries. So that actually gives them a lot of empowerment, but also Iwokrama also has policies because the area is seen as their ancestral land. For instance, indigenous persons from the area, they're given first priority to jobs once they have the qualifications for it, right? So that's one of the benefits to the communities as well, as that we provide jobs, we provide training. And when we talk about training is not only one way, we also learn from communities. We have something that our management is based on combining traditional knowledge of communities with Western science and Western practices. So the 2 actually working together for the best, best practices that you can develop for managing a protected area of our size. So in a nutshell, there are many other benefits from the communities, but I think having communities as shareholders, as co-management, I think is really a big one. And we have certain agreements that lays out that, a memorandum of understanding and a collaborative management agreement that actually lays out responsibilities and so forth.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your experience. Yes. Really interesting to learn more about what Iwokrama does and how you guys work. And yeah, I guess on one side, the sort of very diversified sources of funding for conservation, but also how closely communities are tied into that conservation management. It's really interesting. Jordan or Mita, did either of you want to add anything sort of to that question about how you help the local community? or examples you've seen of helping local communities? I think both of you have kind of alluded to this already.
Yeah, I think Dr. Thomas covered in Guyana. What we're a part of, TREE helps, to give to the Ecotourism Center, which helps all the people involved. But also in other places like Belize, for instance, just making sure to use vendors that are locally owned, locally operated, and are committed to sustainability. And again, that takes a bit of time and effort to vet, to figure out. But that's what TREE does. I mean, I spent the time personally doing that to use the right vendors and things, so that when you come on a trip, you don't need to worry. And that's what we do. But if you're solo traveling, if you're using it eventually and you're out there, I think it's a bit of just doing a little bit of homework, and if you care, and that way you can help the local community just by making sure you're actually using the local community and not staying at a hotel, it's owned by someone over in Turkey or somewhere on the other side of the world.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo what they said. Those are all really strong points.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we've got a question here from Edith. And her question is, I wonder how many ecotourism destinations are accessible for people with reduced mobility, which doesn't necessarily mean wheelchair owners, as most disabilities are invisible, because populations are aging or many chronic illnesses exist, and people want to travel more responsibly, but they also have specific needs, and it seems unreachable to these types of travelers. Has anyone had any experience or comments around that? Yeah, Jordan?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know which areas you're talking about specifically, but in Guyana, for instance, at Iwokrama, and Dr. Thomas, you can back me up on this, a large portion of the people are actually elderly, or people who've basically visited everywhere else, and Guyana's left on the list. A lot of people who are really, really big into birding and don't have the best mobility, and actually are pretty limited in a lot of cases, but are still able to do it. And yeah, I mean, there's trails that are easy to walk on. There's the access, whether it's through a charter flight or whether it's through taking the road. There's a lot of options. I think there's more than people would think, especially in Guyana. Belize as well, but I know that in Guyana, yeah, a large percentage of people that visit are actually older.
We actually had a student a few years ago who came from the UK that was blind. And he was doing everything everybody was doing, but he had somebody with him all the time. And that got me thinking that I wanted, in fact, this year I had planned to take in a group of differently able, we don't say that anymore. We say people living with disabilities. So looking at blind, deaf, and two persons I know who are in wheelchairs, that one of them was formerly a forest officer, and I know he would be interested in it. And we were going to partner with an NGO to do that, but now we have to put that off. But it's something I'm looking at. And that guy with the blind student really opened my eyes, because what happened is that his partner, the person that was taking him, was explaining everything to him. And it was also like he was seeing everything through the eyes of the rest of the class. And so he has had an amazing experience, and he does that all the time. So he really impressed me and got me thinking of how we can open it up to everybody, if you know what I mean.
That's great. Thanks so much. I think, yeah, there's been building awareness in perhaps tourism space, but in the conservation space, for instance, about just diversity in general, and accessibility and inclusion. But some of that debate hasn't extended enough towards people with different abilities, disabilities. So that's really neat to hear that's an area that you're exploring and conscious of. Thanks. So we're very short on time, and I'm conscious that we need to wrap up soon. I believe at least a couple of you need to go imminently. Okay. Yeah, Mita, feel free, just signal me when you need to go. I'll just maybe, I've got two quick questions. Do you want to dash off now, Mita?
Yeah, maybe I should just head out now before you guys get into the questions. But, I just really want to thank all of you for enabling me to join. And yeah, let's just keep the conversations going about this important topic. All right.
That's fantastic. Thanks
you,
so
Mita.
much.
Thank you for joining.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
If people want to find out more, it's adventurely.app. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye now. Take care. All right. So if you've got time, we'll just run through these last two questions quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So we've got a question here. In case I missed this earlier, what's the timeline for reopening Guyana for foreign tourists? Is anything set on that?
Well, our airports just opened this week, the 2 international airports, and I know the Guyana Tourism Authority and so are working, and the Visit Rupununi, where we are linked to as well, as how soon we're going to start accepting guests. So soon we'll be able to put up that kind of information very soon. So I would ask people to just keep looking at for instance, for Iwokrama, our Facebook pages, and also maybe for the Guyana Tourism Authority, their website, to get more information on that. Just keep an eye on it. But we haven't opened for tourism as yet, but our airports are open for people who want to come and work and so forth. So I think within the next month and a half, 2 months, I suspect, because we already have, we're starting to put systems in place, protocols, hygiene protocols, medical center, make sure our medical center is up to standard, and evacuation policies and all of those sorts of things. So we'll be ready in a few months, I think.
Thanks. Probably best to take the time with these things and make sure they're done right. So
absolutely
more assurance.
No, it's seriously now. It's seriously now.
So we just had one last question here from Bo about Zika, which says COVID's rightfully the focus, but pre-COVID, Zika was a barrier for people visiting countries like Guyana, or lack of understanding around Zika was a barrier. Are there any updates on Zika? And or is it no longer a concern?
It's a great question.
I don't think it's a good question. Guyana didn't really get hit by Zika as Brazil did. I've never had any of these, the Zika, the chikungunya, and so on. And I am in the interior all the time. And dengue and malaria. You had chikungunya from India?
But I got it in Jamaica. Right. I spent almost 2 months in Guyana and didn't get it, and I went to Jamaica for 1 week and I got it in Jamaica during that.
Yeah, so that's where people are concentrating.
Something about the interior and the mosquitoes. And again, this not. It's not to say it doesn't exist. Malaria is there. These things could be there, but there's a lot less than you would think.
Malaria.
Right? The people you see that work in interior, that spend all that time, it's much lower than you would think. Much lower.
Yeah, I've never had malaria. And I've been working, I'm a tropical forest ecologist. I've been doing this for 25 plus years, and I've never had it. And I don't take too many tablets because because I'm doing it constantly, if you take too much medication. So if you're coming for a holiday, I think you should do prophylactics, but long-term use, it's a problem. So I'm very conscious. A few places that I've gone, I've taken Malarone, and so just as a precaution, but not in Iwokrama. It's like some places I had to go and do research. But I think you just need to be very conscious. A few people on the coast have come to the coast, and probably 2 years ago or so, I think there was a dengue outbreak, but that seems to have settled now. I'm not really hearing much about dengue. COVID just seems to be the one that is in everybody's mind at the moment. So for these other diseases, no. We haven't been seeing any incidents recently at Iwokrama.
Okay.
Malaria, no, we haven't had malaria cases for a few years now.
Great. That's really great to know. I think sometimes when you're outside of a country looking in, it always seems like it's more of a danger than sometimes is the reality when you're there. That's been my experience when I've worked.
Yes.
Well, that's reassuring. So I just, we're at the end of our hour here, so I want to wrap up. But before we do, I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you and to Mita, who's just left, for being here. It's a real treat to have you guys here, and it's really, really great. It's been an exciting and super interesting discussion. So thank you. Jordan, I did want to mention again.
Thank you very much.
No. so we're offering kind of a special discount to anyone who's been here for this webinar on a tour that's planned for next year in Guyana. Jordan, do you want to just mention really quickly in a nutshell what that tour is about?
Yeah, on April 3rd to 9th, we'll be going to visit the Iwokrama Centre that you've heard so much about, as well as a few other places in Guyana. So if you're lucky, you'll get to meet Dr. Thomas as well, if she's out in the field during that time, or potentially in Georgetown. It's a 7-day long trip, and we're also going to visit probably the best waterfall in the world. And yeah, you see the big smile there. It's an incredible thing. And yeah, it's going to be an amazing trip in my favorite part of the world, the most pristine, just the feeling you get from being in nature there, but then also contributing to sustainable tourism, helping with conservation just by being on the trip, because of the way we have it set up and the partnership we have. I'm really looking forward to it. Christy will send out details for the promo code if you want to join. If you have any other questions, you can message me directly. You can message Christy and learn more about it. But yeah, you'll have all of my contact information and her contact info, or you can get mine through Christy. And yeah, we're really looking forward to being there and hopefully seeing some of you on the trip as well.
We're really excited from this end too to be working with you on this. I've just shared the link in the chat if anyone's interested, where you can find out more about the tour online, and we'll send out info after too. But yeah, Jordan and Tree are offering their tour at quite a significant discount during COVID, and we're offering kind of an additional discount too through Terra Incognita, so it's a great deal. And just, yeah, if anyone, we mentioned where to find info about Adventurely. Jordan, if people want to find out more about Tree, is it best just to send them to your website?
Yeah, if you just go to treeexploration.com and you can go to the contact page there to contact me, or there's a lot of information just there. You can join the email list and message me directly. However, I'm always available. I'm always wanting to talk about sustainable development in any way, even energy policy, all that stuff too, and obviously the travel aspect I love. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
I've just shared a link to Tree, your main website, Tree's main website there too.
Yeah,
and Dr.
And this this link, Dr. Thomas actually told me today earlier just when we spoke. This is something I haven't even seen myself, but I've been looking forward to seeing. So yeah, this YouTube film, we can share a link with that as well. Hopefully in the next newsletter. Or I
will go and look for the link and send it to you, Jordan.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that actually. It's supposed to be amazing.
I'll send it to Jordan, and he could perhaps send it to the group.
Fantastic.
There's also there's another one. There's another video which we will hopefully have a link to, called Lost Land of the Jaguar, which is an amazing documentary about Guyana. And I was watching it, and to my surprise, I saw Dr. Thomas in the documentary. It was professionally made yeah, by people from the UK.
Yes. Oh, I never told you. I never told you that story. That was with the BBC. Yes. 2007, that was filmed. Yes. I don't think we ever got to chat about that. Yes, one of those. So Jordan, I'm gonna send you the link to Heart, right? And then you could send it out.
Yeah. What we can do from Terra Incognita, we can just sort of consolidate all the resources and links from this webinar, from this chat, really, and share that with everyone who's signed up. So we'll share all of that stuff because it looks like there's some fantastic information and videos to check out. And just really quickly to mention, next week we've got another Terra Incognita Facebook Live event happening next Wednesday, the 21st. That's going to be talking about ecotourism, a little bit about the ethical code of conduct we're working on developing now. And if you want to find out more about that, I'll share the link to the code too, which is this one. If you haven't heard of it already and you want to check out what it's all about, that's the link. And then lastly, we're going to launch a list of the top ethical Costa Rica eco-tours at the end of this month on the 28th of October. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe in future we'll be able to do that for Guyana. That would be fantastic, because I think Guyana has just a ton to offer. So I'm really looking forward to learning more and hopefully visiting in the not too distant future. So thank you again so much.
Please do.
I plan to. And thanks to everyone who's joined us live. I hope you've enjoyed the chat today, and we'll send through the recording and all of the details after as a follow-up also. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined as well.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.